All right, Steve, tell me more about moisture conditioning and the poly.
If a developer goes in and cuts the streets and cuts the pads or gets ready to cut the pads, they'll go in there and they'll use a water cannon basically and water down, and they're calling it moisturing the maintenance, moisture conditioning the soil. Then they'll take huge, I don't know the square footage or the yardage, but poly the whole subdivision minus the streets, and that's to lock in that moisture in the ground until it's time for construction.
Right. And then they put 6 inches or a foot of dirt
on top of that. Right.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure they do some testing, but there's been cases where a developer's done that, but they actually missed 6 to 7 lots, completely missed them. And those came up obviously a couple of years later, and they all failed, and all the houses all had issues with foundations. Whereas the way you do it with the water injection with the chemical on individual lots, and the thing is that when Scott comes in and does it, when he's completed, we get a weekly report that says we did block B, lot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we track it on our maps. It says it's done, and that verifies that we didn't miss any. So there's check and balances.
Yeah, that was the deal with the poly is the developer can come in, water cannon it, put his poly down, backfill it, build a pad. But if you don't build on it in a time frame, that's a problem. And that happened to me and a previous employer I worked with is that the subdivision basically went null and void once 2008 hit and the market dropped. And we came back in and moved in there in 2013. Well, none of those lots were prepared anymore. So every lot had to be re-injected. Then, like I said before, it had a 6-month span on it. If you didn't build on it in 6 months, they couldn't guarantee it, and you had to be back out there injecting it again. And we did test everyone. Yeah. After we did the injections, we had them all tested, and if the test came back within our parameters, we moved forward.
I didn't even know about that 6-month thing.
Yeah, they give you a time frame. It was a time frame.
I didn't even realize
and
that.
I guess they just figured that, that's the poly is supposed to trap the moisture, but it's still gonna evaporation, runoff down underground. I mean, you just don't know.
When I was out there injecting, we've done some of those subdivisions after they moisture condition it and they got the poly on it. They dig it out and they put it in there like you talk about in lifts and then spray water on it and build it back up.
Right.
Then they put that poly on it. Well, while they're putting that poly on it, what we see is they're running that dozer back and forth, spreading that dirt on it, and it tears that poly all to pieces. Right. So it just kind of defeats the whole purpose.
So how much is it really trap it if it's got a bunch of holes in it?
Right. That's what we saw.
No, I agree. Yeah.
Now, that may not be that way everywhere, but that's what we've seen.
Well, and then it's no different than that. I mean, I can remember plain as day, you go in there and you start benching a lot, cutting out for a driveway, and all of a sudden here comes all the poly flapping up. And you're like, well, I mean, that just kind of, once again, it defeats the purpose. If you're ripping up half of it while you're benching a lot in a driveway cut, it's no longer doing its job.
Right.
But chemicals the way to go. Chemicals the way to go on the front end, right down the street.
Yeah, it's such a more permanent solution than some other stabilizing methods. So that's great. That's great to hear.